Acts of Vengeance is a thriller, drama, action film. It was never on my radar, but while I was looking up reviews for another movie, this guy listed a bunch of underrated action thrillers that he thought were really good. And I shouldn't have trusted a stranger in IMDb review section, because I borrowed this movie thinking it'd be pretty good, and it was not. It stars Antonio Banderas as a fast-talking lawyer. He's a bit of a workaholic, though, and he skips out on his daughter's talent show, and they end up getting murdered, his wife and his daughter. And he doesn't know why, but a year passes. The police don't have any leads. He's wallowing in pity. He's getting drunk all the time until he decides to take a vow of silence, train his body, and never speak again until the killers are caught. So, I mean, you have all the elements there for a solid action revenge movie, right? You got Antonio Banderas. You've got the basic revenge plot. All you need now is like a cohesive story, maybe him fighting some people, and you got a decent action movie. Wrong. You don't get any of that. First off, the movie's lower budget, so you can forgive the daughter's really terrible acting. However, she's only in the movie for like a minute. Same with the wife, so you get no connection between Antonio Banderas and his loving wife. Also, there's a lot of voiceover in this movie. After he takes the vow of silence, he doesn't talk, so it makes it really hard for him to interrogate people and get help and things like that. So they throw in a lot of voiceover, which sort of kills everything. You know, instead of having a silent badass protagonist, you just have voiceover all the time, and the voiceover sort of tells you the whole movie. So at the beginning of the film, he says he's a fast-talking lawyer, he's really good, words are his weapon. Instead of having like an opening sequence in a courtroom where they show this, the voiceover just tells you he's a great lawyer. And then there's that awful sequence, the funeral. Essentially, Robert Forster shows up. He's his father-in-law. He mentions his daughter dying twice and just starts this expositional speech about like, oh, my daughter left all her friends and family to marry you, but she's dead now, so I hate you, Frank Valletta. I hate you. Don't ever talk to me again. My daughter's dead now. And it's just, that's the only scene he's in. I mean, the whole speech could have been condensed to one sentence, but okay, I'm losing track. There's so much more wrong with this movie. Okay, so there's the whole getting drunk and being depressed, and then he walks into a bar and there's an illegal MMA fighting ring in there for some reason, where he meets Carl Urban. He plays a police officer who fights MMA once in a while to let off some steam, but he's barely in the movie. And then after that, Antonio Banderas, his character is propositioned by an underage prostitute. They get in a fight with her pimps, I guess, and then he gets stabbed, falls into a book store, finds Marcus Aurelius' meditations, and decides to do the vow of silence. So they have the whole 80s montage of he practices Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for a couple of sequences, so now he's a master. And then they don't show him fighting in the pit anymore, though. I mean, he picked a fight with a couple of people when he was drunk, but they don't have him fighting people in the pit to show that he's a good fighter now. So I don't know why they didn't do that. Anyways, it moves on to him going to the crime scene where his wife and daughter were found, and carjackers try to, attack him because he's got a nice car in a bad neighborhood. So he defeats them all. He gets shot. He wakes up in this strange woman's house. She's like, I'm an ER nurse. I took you here because I like to help the homeless. So, which makes no sense, because why wouldn't she just take him to the ER? I mean, he's not a homeless person, so you don't have to take him to your own house. And you don't know who this guy is. He's got a nice car, so you know that he can pay for like the bills, and then you could have the police show up so he leaves in a hurry. And then, but no, the script doesn't follow basic logic like that. It just sort of needs a couple more rewrites, and then you'd at least have a coherent plot versus all these asinine things happening. And then there's a subplot with the nurse having bad guys come after her because they want her to steal drugs for them. And then the movie winds down to a rather simple climax. The movie is not without merits. Antonio Banderas does a pretty decent job for acting. He also did a lot of his own stunts, so the physical performance is there as well. He's game. Carl Urban's underused, typical. The movie has 2.5 solid fight sequences, the finale, the carjacker attack scene, and one at the beginning of the movie. However, if you're an action movie lover or a martial arts movie lover like I am, you're willing to sit through the minimum of bad storytelling for some decent action, this movie will test your patience, because it's just absolutely mind-blowing how bad the main story is. There's like one good sequence in this movie that's not an action sequence. It's where Frank goes to talk to a detective about the case, and then the detective gets bored halfway through the conversation, starts texting. Great sequence. That's the only decent scene of the movie that isn't a fight scene. And it's mind-boggling how bad the screenplay is. Direction's fine. Isaac Florentine, I like the movie Bridge of Dragons. That's the only movie of his I've seen. It's not his fault. It's the script. The script's awful. Story's awful. Total waste of time. 90 minutes I'll never get back. I give Acts of Vengeance 2 out of 10.